Welcome to Women in Transition. It's Dr. Sasheen. Um, sorry, I am eating grapes and I'm about to make myself a cup of chai because I really want chai. It's that mid afternoon or early evening or whatever you want to call it kind of lull. And I don't drink coffee, so tea is my caffeine of choice when I need a little pick me up. I don't like coffee or energy drinks, but I do like tea. So I am having this, which no endorsement here. It's just happens to be the one that I like the most. And so, yeah, when we're done, I'm gonna make myself a little chai and make myself a little sit on the couch and decompress. It's been a long day. So, what am I going to talk about today? Because I'm not here for a long time, just for a good time. I was having a conversation with a good friend, and that's what sparked today's discussion and what I've been posting about all day. And that is when you talk about making any kind of change in your life, when you talk about making any kind of, get the black grapes, y'all. They're so good. They're so sweet right now. Can't go wrong with these. Get the black grapes. When you talk about making any kind of change in your life, people come out of the woodwork to tell you that you can't run away from your problems. Decide to quit your job, you can't run away from your problems. Decide to end your relationship, you can't run away from your problems. You can't run away from whatever it is. Wherever you go, you're there. So you need to figure out what's wrong in your world before you make any changes. So here's what I'm going to say to that. There is some truth to you. Wherever you go, there you are, right? Like there's absolute truth to that. You take yourself with you, plain and simple. But let me tell you something. More often than not, you're not taking the problems of the present moment with you, because guess what? You're not the problem. You're not the problem. So this idea that if you decide to do anything that is markedly different than what you've always done, that somehow that means you're running away from facing responsibilities or facing your fears or facing the truth about, it could mean that you're in a bad situation and you need to move on. It could mean that what was once good context, good job, good relationship, good whatever, is no longer good for you. And it's time to move on. And because it's simply time to move on, of course I'm taking myself wherever I go because I'm not the problem, right? I don't need to fix me. I'm not the problem. I need to actually fix my circumstances. I need to fix what's happening around me so that I can bloom in a better way. Because the only way to bloom where you are planted is to assume the ground is not toxic. If the ground is toxic, why are we encouraging each other to bloom where you are planted? I will tell you why. There are two reasons. Number one, misery loves company, right? We are invested, not all of us, please understand that, but far too many of us are invested in our trauma. And so when someone breaks out of the trauma bonding to attempt to do something different, we can get very defensive and we want to hold on to them. That's no reason to stay planted in toxic soil. But there are so many people, when you attempt to extricate yourself and move forward, who are going to go, hang on, you're just running away from your problems. No, sweetheart, I'm running away from you. There's a difference. Now, you might be my problem, in which case I'm still running away from you, but I'm not running away from my problems. I'm running away from your problems. I did that video about Gen X and relationships and how loyalty is going to be the death of so many of us. And this is an extension of that idea, that we stay in places and with people because we have been brainwashed with this idea that you can't just run away. Your problems aren't going to go away. You don't like the current administration, you can't relocate. No country's going to be as good to you. How do you know? Have you been to all of them? Have you tested the waters at all someplace else? I remember the first time I said I was leaving my hometown. Excuse me. I went to graduate school in another town. It was only like 2 hours away. It wasn't even very far. But for the first time, I was gone from the everyday life that I had lived. Many people were very supportive and were like, go you. Some friends took me to find an apartment. Lots of folks came down to see me. But there was a significant number of people who were like, You're going to go back to school again. And what are you going to do this time? You're always looking for something. You're always on the hunt. You can't run away from whatever it is you're chasing. And I had to explain to people, even back then, I'm not running away from anything. I'm chasing possibilities because that's just kind of who I am. I like living in the possible. And in order to live in the possible, you have to be willing to make yourself uncomfortable. Well, that reality makes a lot of other people uncomfortable who don't like to live in the possible, for whom security is the most important thing. So my pushing the limits of possibility wasn't great, but it was fine as long as I didn't go too far. The minute I left, and you'd be amazed at what just a 2-hour drive distance does to relationships. The minute I left, I lost a lot of people who were just like, you're just running, you're just running. 20-some years later, I didn't go back. Didn't go back because I took me with me. I liked me. I didn't necessarily like all the things happening in my life though. And I recognized that there could be something else out there. And why not go try to find out what that something else might be? Because if I was genuinely an okay person, I felt like I was an okay person, then I wasn't trying to get away from myself. I was just tired of living in the Midwest. That's it. Just want to try something different. And grad school seemed like a good thing to do. So I went off and did it. And then from there, I was like, oh, I don't actually have to go back to Kansas City. I can go forward and figure out where that might take me. That took me to a little island in the Caribbean for a year. From there, I bounced to the desert, and then I bounced to another island off the East Coast. So I spent some time bouncing. And every time I would go someplace new, certain voices would say, you gotta settle down. You gotta think about the future. You can't outrun yourself. And I'd always say, but I'm not outrunning anything. I'm having a pretty good time living, actually. And that leads me to my second point. So many times people will tell you that you're just running. If you want to do things outside of the prescribed norm, you're just running. They don't want to hear that, no, there's another way to live. Because the prescription for living that we have been given for the past few decades is that you go to school, you finish school, you get a job, you get married, you buy a house, you start a family. You live every single day raising that family, nurturing that relationship, paying off your mortgage. If you're lucky, you can go on vacation. If you're not, you don't get to. You might start a business. You may not. You stay on your job 5 years, you move on, get another job, but you work and you live in a certain way. And so when someone comes along that shakes up that narrative, a lot of people don't know how to act. And for Gen X, that's hard because we desperately don't want our friends not to love us, right? But at the same time, asking you, my Gen X sisters and brothers, to think about how different could your life have been if you said, I'm not running away from anything. And even if I am, who cares? Let me ask y'all something. They say the grass is not greener on the other side. How do you know unless you go look at the other side? How do you know? Because somebody told us that the grass is not greener? Because somebody told us that you can't run away from your problems? That somebody told us, wherever you go, there you are. So you might as well figure out what you need to figure out right where you are anyway, instead of going someplace else where people aren't going to support you. They're probably not supporting you where you are. Chances are they're just happy you're still living in trauma because that means they can live in trauma with you. Because we love the Trauma Olympics. We're not quite as jazzed. It's not quite as sexy on the Healing Olympics train. So, where would you be now if you believed the idea that you're not running away from anything? That you're just taking yourself, who you are, and moving it to a place where you can bloom better. Just bloom better. Because sometimes circumstances just change. And it's okay to say, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. Now, there are going to be people who jump into the comment section, and I'm going to go ahead and say this now. That includes relationships, everybody. It includes relationships. Sometimes what was working really well for a decade ain't working so hot in the second one, or the third one, or the fourth one, or the fifth one, right? And so we have to remember that it isn't because people are necessarily broken that they want to go do something new. They may just want to go try something new because where they are is broken, but they're just fine. There's an old movie called Mame, and I don't know if anybody has seen it, but one of the premises that Mame is this extraordinary socialite who kind of lives by the seat of her pants, and she ends up having to take in this orphan and raise him because I think something happens to either her brother or a sibling. Anyway, she becomes a parent. She's not a great parent. But one of the lines in that movie I have used so many times talking to clients, when I teach my students arguments and persuasion, I've used it over and over and over again. Mame says, life is a banquet, and most poor suckers are starving to death. I have thought about that line since the first time I heard it, the very first time I saw it, and it rolled out of her mouth. And it struck me like, if life is a banquet and we could eat anything, and I mean anything, why do most of us default to the chip and dip? Why are most of us eating taquitos? I'm not telling you that you have to eat caviar, but there's a whole line of things, right, that we could possibly be sampling, but our perspective and our world is so narrow. And we're told if you deviate, it's because you're running from something, that you're trying not to face reality. That's why you want to travel the world. That's why you got a passport and bought a ticket to some place that you've never been before, because you're trying to escape reality. What's so great about reality all the time? Like, when did it become not acceptable to dream ourselves into a new place? When did it not become acceptable to say, I'm fine, I just don't want to be here anymore? It instills a lot of fear in people, the idea that they will get out into the world and they will fail. That they will get out into the world and people will look at them and go, we told you so. You got out there, you went to Singapore, and you got pickpocketed. You can get pickpocketed in New York. And you went to Brussels and your hostel was full and you had to sleep in a bus station. I've slept in my car before. It was intentional. I was between places and I didn't want to get a hotel room. And I did that where I lived. You got out there and you ran out of money. Sorry, you ran out of money. Do you not know how to get a job? Do you not know how to figure out how to make a few bucks to get you the next thing? So many of the things that we are afraid might happen to us are put on us by people who are afraid for us, because they don't want to have to bail us out, number one. And number two, it's so much more comfortable if we're in misery together, because misery loves company. So when you start thinking to yourself, I don't really like what's happening in the world, in this country, in this place, in this city, in this town, in this relationship. And I really do think that maybe, just maybe, I want to try something different. I want to go back to school at 55. I want to quit my job and go be a writer. I want to bicycle across the United States. I knew a woman who in her late 40s decided to go hike the Appalachian Trail. She was coming out of a divorce. Everyone around her was saying, you should just settle into your job as an architect and figure out your life and go to therapy. And she's like, I don't want to go to therapy. I want to go hike the Appalachian Trail. I don't want to go to therapy. I want to go commune with nature. Why can't I go? And so many naysaying voices kept trying to tell her, you're just running away from your problems. And I said to her, run away from your problems. Because if you take yourself with you wherever you go, I can take myself with me and solve my problems in nature. I can take myself with me and solve my problems on a therapist's couch. Do you, boo? You need to do you. You need to do the best thing that you can do that will make you happy. She went and hiked part of the trail, not the whole thing. But she hiked enough of it to feel like she had done what she wanted to do, which was get away from the noise. She had just come out of a divorce. She needed peace, not 1,000 voices telling her how to heal. She actually needed to go listen to herself. And she couldn't do that where she was. But so many times when people make the decision to try to do something a little outside of the norm, so many times we're told, you can't outrun your problems. You need to figure out what's happening where you are and solve your problems, because you just take yourself wherever you go. And then what? Well, maybe I'll solve the problem on a beach with the ocean. Maybe I'll solve the problem at the foot of a mountain in this beautiful location, living in a little grass hut. Maybe I'll solve that problem by just being alone, because I can hear my own words and not everybody else's. I really want you to interrogate with yourself. Like, what does it mean to bloom where you are planted? And if the ground is toxic, why are you blooming there? Why are you staying where you cannot thrive? Why are you staying where your survival, your literal survival, is predicated on sharing trauma with other people? There's no prize for dying with having endured the most stress. There's no prize there. There's no prize for being the one with the most scars. There's no prize for being the one with the most stories, battle stories to tell about how you endured and you didn't run away and you hunkered down and you stuck it out. And by golly, I'm dying of chronic stress, but I didn't go anyplace else. I didn't run away. I stood where I was and I played the trauma game with everyone around me. There's no prize for that. At the end of the day, we all die. Nobody gets out of this. Nobody gets out of life alive. Nobody. But how we get to death has got to be a better question, right? Like, we're all going to die. How am I going to get there? How do I get there? Do I get there by living a life that is literally based on the fear that if I step outside the box, I'll lose everything? Or do I live a life with the idea that I like me just the way I am, but I might need to like me someplace else, right? I like me just the way I am, but I might need to like me someplace else. Someplace else might do better for me. Some thoughts I hope to leave you with. Just, again, nobody gets out of this alive, and there is no prize. There's no prize, y'all. None, for how many battle scars you have. Because the ultimate prize is just not worth it. If you catch the replay, say hey to me. I really appreciate everyone who's tuned in. Let's see, we got, hang on a second. Sorry. I don't know what's happening. Uh-oh. Hang on, guys. No, don't do that. See, I know what's going to happen. There. Make it go away. Make it go away. There we go. Okay. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. Please click like, subscribe, and share the video. Start the conversation with yourself and people in your life. Ask the hard question. If you've been itching, if you have that little itch in your brain, and so many of us Gen X women have that little itch, that call of the wild, as I like to call it, but you've never answered it because you've always believed that, well, if I'm itching to go do something way different, it must mean that there's something wrong with me. I am a big proponent of therapy. Do not get me wrong. I think therapy is one of the best things ever on the planet because we could all use some help in our healing. But I am very suspicious of a culture that looks at everything as a call to therapy. Everything isn't a trauma call for help. Sometimes we are just different. Sometimes we just want something different. And we don't need to be fixed of the desire for something different. We need to be encouraged to go figure out what that is and take ourselves with us so that we can bloom as we plant someplace else. Hopefully that reaches someone today. Again, click like, subscribe, and share. I'd really appreciate it. Have a good one, and I will talk to you again tomorrow. Take care, all. Bye now.